Question was, President Biden, what were you thinking ever running for re-election? Let's be clear. If Biden had stayed in the race, as some are saying, well, maybe he should have stayed in there, he almost certainly would have done worse than Harris. So for anyone suggesting that the Democrats lost because Biden dropped out, that is a fantasy. The issue is that Biden probably never should have run in the first place.
While many in the Democratic Party and even members of Kamala Harris's own team lay a lot of blame on Joe Biden for the electoral loss that Democrats experienced this week, turns out that the president's own team is actually pointing fingers right back at them. So according to Biden's biographer, Franklin Foer, some of his closest confidants are still under the impression that if Biden had just stayed in the race, Democrats would have been victorious. He would have been elected for a second term. And in a piece for The Atlantic titled "Why Biden's Team Thinks Harris Lost," Foer writes that members of Biden's clan continue to stoke the delusion that Biden would have won the election, and some of his advisors feared that he might publicly voice that deeply misguided view. Now, Foer says that Biden's advisors were reluctant to say anything negative about Harris, but Biden advisors did level critiques at her campaign based on the months they'd spent strategizing in anticipation of the election. Embedded in their autopsies was their own unstated faith that they could have done better. Now, look, I think some of the critiques are on the note, like they're right. Kamala Harris was doing okay in the beginning of her campaign. Yes, part of it had to do with the excitement, but part of it also had to do with her message. And then she changed her message to a pro-business, more moderate message in regard to economic policies. So let's just show that Trump was clearly ahead in the polls when Biden was in the race. So before I get to, some of this other stuff and go to you, Cenk, like let's take a look at this. The New York Times poll on the day that Biden dropped out had him losing by 3 points nationally and getting wrecked in the battleground states. Let's take a look at the other. Wrecked, absolutely. A New York Times Siena College poll found Trump was ahead of Biden by 6 percentage points among likely voters and 8 points ahead among registered voters. And then on top of which, let's look at the other graph here. In a July Gallup poll, Biden received a 36% job approval rating from the American people, and that was his lowest ever. The majority of Americans, 58%, disapproved of the job that Biden was doing. So it remains to be seen how Biden or his staffers could think that he would have won this election. Right now, his popularity has ticked back up slightly to an underwhelming 41%. So, Cenk.
Yeah, so fair show in America. So I'm actually gonna give a tiny bit of credit to the Biden staffers in a minute, okay? But first, a lot of discredit. I want you to notice in the first thing that Anna read, you guys, the Biden advisors are split. Half of them are saying, please don't say it out loud that we would have won. That's really embarrassing. Don't do that. It'll just make it worse for your legacy. Because they're trying to look out for him, right? So I don't know which ones are which, so I don't know who to give credit to on that side. But the other half are the deluded ones who are like, we would have won. Remember the garbage comment that Biden made, 4 or 5 days before the election? Mm-hmm. If you watch that whole clip, it's not just that he called Trump supporters garbage, I think by accident. But he's like, and then what, rally, Puerto Rico,
it was a
supporters
disaster.
Garbage. He can't speak anymore.
Yep.
He would have fallen apart at the seams. He might have lost, I think he would have lost about 40 states. He might have lost them all because he couldn't speak at the end. You can't vote for a guy who with absolute certainty is senile, right? So, and losing by 8 nationally?
Come on.
Losing by 7 points, and it would have only gotten worse, not better, because every time he came out to speak, imagine they would have done another debate.
No, but
come on.
That delusion is what kept him in the race. First of all, that delusion led him to run for re-election in the first place, which he should not have done, okay? That delusion led him to remain in the race as long as he did, thus depriving Democratic voters of an opportunity to engage in a robust primary process and pick a candidate that they wanted rather than a candidate who was anointed. And look, who knows, it might have ended up being Kamala Harris. I doubt it, but there's a possibility. But if it had happened the right way, she would at least have the opportunity to run a full campaign as opposed to a last minute, there's only a few months left campaign that was a disaster. Okay, there were a few highlights, a few good moments from Kamala's campaign, but honestly, I can count them on one hand. In reality, she pivoted and she pivoted real hard to an unpopular message and she wouldn't get off of it. So that was the critique that some of these Biden staffers had, and I want to get to that. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, no, one more thing here. So notice that the Biden staffers said they could have done better. So that's their ego talking. They're like, oh, it doesn't matter who the candidate is anyway. We always use these corporate robots. Hey, will you do everything the donors say? Yes, sir, absolutely. Okay, you're good enough. Just bring out the widget in the assembly line. Biden, Harris, whatever they're called, whatever their race is, who cares, right? Because the advisors think that they're in charge. And so well, we would have run a better race and we would have won. Yeah, but brother, the candidate matters. And besides which, how are you doing that so far? I mean, you were doing disastrously. It's not like you were up by 8 when Kamala Harris took over. You're the rocket scientists who were down by 8.
Yeah.
Right? So now, nevertheless, to be fair to whoever it is on whichever side, some of the Biden advisors apparently knew exactly what Kamala Harris was doing wrong, and they're right about that.
So in the beginning, not only did she have a more economic populist message, she would go after corporate greed, which did play well with Democratic voters. But as the critics are now saying, she made a mistake by getting off of that message. Harris began the campaign portraying Trump as a stooge of corporate interests and touted herself as a relentless scourge of big business, while Harris was stuck defending the Biden economy and hobbled by lingering anger over inflation. Attacking big business allowed her to go on the offense.
So the fact that they recognize that going populist and attacking big business was the right strategy is shocking. So apparently there's like maybe 1 or 2 smart Democrats on earth, at least in leadership.
What's shocking about it is that they know that that messaging works and they don't deliver on it once. Like that bothers me, right?
100%, but not only that, and maybe Biden prevented them, maybe he's the source of the problem, but it's not like Biden, while he was in the race for a long time. It's not like he ran an anti-big business campaign at all. So apparently those advisors, whoever they are, did not win the argument internally in the Biden team anyway.
Now, then they talk about the pivot, right? Then, quite suddenly, it's not really that sudden when you think about the billionaire money flowing into her campaign coffers, but then quite suddenly, the strain of populism disappeared. One Biden aide told me that Harris steered away from such hard-edged messaging at the urging of her brother-in-law, Tony West, Uber's chief legal officer. To win the support of CEOs, Harris jettisoned a strong argument that deflected attention from one of her weakest issues. Instead, the campaign elevated Mark Cuban as one of its chief surrogates, the very sort of rich guy she had recently attacked. And at the end of October, the New York Times reported that Harris had campaigned 4 times with Liz Cheney, stumping with her more than with any other ally. She appeared more in October with the billionaire Mark Cuban than with Sean Fain. Obviously, that's the president of the United Auto Workers and one of the nation's most visible labor leaders, because F labor, right? Like,
yeah, you guys nailed it. So that analysis by whoever the Biden advisors were exactly correct. It's amazing. Yet no Democrat actually does it. So now more on that. Her sister ran her 2020 campaign, which turned into a disaster. So here she is again. Oh, I'm gonna go to family. Oh, in this case, it's a guy who's basically a glorified lobbyist, her brother-in-law. Oh, you think that big business should get everything? Oh, well, okay, I will listen to you, family member who's a lobbyist, and I will funnel and I will run my campaign saying big business is great. I love corporate CEOs. She bragged so much about that letter of the 90 corporate CEOs who backed her. And in every appearance, they're like, all the CEOs are on our side. What happened to be anti-big business? When she was anti-big business, guys, we showed you this on the show day to day. Her numbers went up, 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 up. She was up 5 points nationally. She had it. At one point, she got a poll that had her up 7 points nationally. That was comfortable enough to win the Electoral College. And I said, oh my God, if we had I said, do you remember? I said, I wish the election were today, because then she would win. From that point, she listened to her dumbass, corrupt brother-in-law, and she turned around and went in a pro-corporate, pro-donor direction, and it cost us everything. So whose fault is it that we lost the election, Biden or Kamala Harris?
Both of them?
Exactly. It's a trick question, guys. It's both. Biden handed her a devastating deficit in terms of the polling. She climbed out of it by running a populist campaign, a gigantic, miraculous comeback. And then like a moron, oh no, you can't say that about a Democratic leader. We all have to cry for Kamala Harris. No, why doesn't she take personal responsibility? Why is it the voters' fault and not the candidate's fault? Right. Democrats, expect better from your candidates.
And the same goes for Joe Biden, who again, I want to repeat, should not have run for a second term. And Karine Jean-Pierre was asked about this. Of course, that's the White House press secretary, about this whole situation, who should take responsibility, who gets the blame. Let's listen to what she has to say.
A lot of criticism in the last couple of days directly addressed at President Biden for some of the questions that have already been asked. Running in the first place or not stepping aside faster. Some of that criticism has also been directed at his team and the advisors around him for advising him to do what he did. Can you address that criticism?
To do what he did, meaning?
Running again, not stepping aside faster, and showing what some people say, quoting folks here, an arrogance of believing he was the only one who could beat Donald Trump.
I mean, well, you said something at the end that I do want to just kind of reiterate and remind folks, and it was a good reminder to me, which is like, look, the president, this is the president who has been the only person has been able to beat Donald Trump. I mean, that is true. In 2020, he was able to do that. There were more than 20 candidates who tried to beat him, and he was the one that has been able to do that.
There was a cover up in regard to Joe Biden's mental decline.
Yeah.
Okay, let's stop. The election's over, so let's stop walking on eggshells because people are gonna get upset. I don't care how upset people get, okay? There was a cover up by the Democratic Party in regard to Joe Biden's mental decline, okay? As a result of that, I mean, they just sat around and allowed this guy to run for re-election, knowing what a freaking risk that was. I mean, they're running around talking about what a threat Donald Trump is as they are carrying out an egregious cover up. And the Democratic Party is super lost right now, okay? They are, and they're gonna keep losing elections if they keep, engaging in this ridiculous hive mind and not taking personal responsibility for the cover up itself, the failure of the Harris campaign, the corruption that has completely taken over the Democratic Party. If none of that changes, there's no reason to support Democrats. What have they been offering us, Cenk?
I know. So listen, I don't want people thinking we're Monday morning quarterbacking, because right now that's what everybody's doing. Everyone who said Biden was gonna win now is blaming Biden. Everyone who said Kamala Harris was gonna win is now playing the blame game. We told you this about a year ago. Now I'm gonna show you this tape, and we started this because right now what all these people who are yelling at us are saying is, oh, you know what? Biden should have stepped down from the race over a year ago so that we could have a real primary, so we could pick the best candidate. Gee, I wonder who's been saying that for the last year. So let's show you the tape, C2. I'm tired of these guys. We're doing a petition. And so look, the petition is get out. I put it a lot more politely than that because a lot of people love Joe Biden for whatever reason. They just think he's too old and he's gonna lose. I 100% agree that he's going to lose. So we're doing a petition, President Biden, please drop out. You're gonna send in a hobbled candidate who's 80 and looks like a wounded antelope, who 67% of Democratic voters say, we don't want him, we don't want him. The guy's gotta go.
That was in September of 2023. September of 2023. Okay, I remember people being real upset with us, so angry. Oh, you're hurting the Democratic Party. Because God forbid, political pundits do their job, right? Like, I get it. I get that people expect you to actually be an operative for one party or the other, okay? That's not what we do here. We give our analysis And the fact that that's what you were saying on air in September of 2023, and it would take him nearly a year to finally drop out of the race is infuriating. The cover-up was happening the whole time, but we were the bad guys, right? It's so ridiculous.
So I'm sure though all those pundits that are saying he should have dropped out in September 2023 are going to come apologize to us for yelling at us at the time and for a whole nother year, right? And by the way, because of, I couldn't believe he wasn't dropping out. In an act of desperation, as you all know, I ran in the presidential primary against him. A couple of the URLs that I bought were BidensGoingToLose.com, WoundedAntelope.com, okay? So this was so obvious, as every liar on TV and every liar in the Democratic Party was lying to you guys about how great a shape Joe Biden was in. So last thing I'll read you guys is, so they, we talked about Liz Cheney and they decided to go with the corporate CEOs and the Liz Cheney strategy because it was such a genius move because they were gonna get the Republicans in the suburbs, remember?
Oh yeah.
They were gonna get the moderate Republicans.
It always works.
So let's see how that turned out. Let's go to Andrew Perez writing in Rolling Stone. Harris only received 5% of Republican votes, less than 6% Joe Biden won in 2020 when he beat Trump, as well as the 7% won by Hillary Clinton in 2016 when she lost to him.
Nailed it.
Oh, we're gonna get all those Republicans. They love the Cheneys. And we're gonna get so many Republicans, we don't need progressive votes. We don't need to do the right thing. We could still kiss our donor's ass and win because the Republicans love us. How'd that turn out for you? Remember, the next time they lie to you, how much they lied to you this time. Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.